Good morning, everyone. My name is Melissa Schrock. I'm one of the co-chairs of the case 2014. I'm joined by Steve Bonelli, my other co-chair, and Mike Domenico, who is the judge's chair for this year's committee. We apologize for the delay, and we're glad to see all these faces here. The case is now in its 5th year. It's organized and run by our alumni association, the AACRE. That's the Center for Real Estate at MIT, as you now know. We pride ourselves on being the premier graduate student real estate case competition in the world. And in honor of that, this year on our 5th anniversary, we decided to take the case international and bring it to London. There's a few people that I have to thank. I'm not going to go on too long, but we've had tremendous support from several of our corporate sponsors and individuals at those corporate sponsors over the past several years. And frankly, quite sincerely, we could not do it without those people. Some of them are here today, either in the audience or as judges. So we've got Hans Norby from CoStar PPR, sponsor and a finalist judge today. Sean Hurley from Skanska. Jason Dunn from Ropes and Gray is out there in the audience. And we're also joined today by Jason Blank from Brockton Capital, sponsoring this year. And we're proud to have some other finalist judges of the amazing professionals that we were lucky enough to get. Ross Blair from Hines UK. Charlie Graham from Europa Capital, Charles, sorry. And Simon Fisk from Pembroke. This year was our biggest year ever. We had 42 teams from around the world compete in this year's case. They represented 5 different countries on 3 different continents. And those 42 teams were narrowed down to 12 teams that competed yesterday in the semifinals. These teams are all anonymous, but I do want to give a shout out to the 12 teams and their institutions who made it to the semifinals. They were Georgetown, NYU, York University in Canada, the University of Cambridge, Cornell, MIT, Hong Kong University of Technology, Columbia, another York team, Villanova, Harvard, and a second Cornell team. So you should all be very proud that you made it this far. Yesterday, we had to unfortunately eliminate 9 of those teams, and you're going to see the 3 finalist teams presenting today. You won't know which institution they're from. The judges don't know which institution they're from. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve, who's just going to talk very briefly about what the case was that they were given this year.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm going to keep this very brief. Basically, the site that we chose this year is actually just down the river on the South Bank. It's the London Television Centre. It was recently sold. It transacted for about £60 million, and it was sold to the tenant, who is ITV. And they've been in the site for approximately, I would say about 40 years now, 45 years. So the students basically were asked to create a development proposal for ITV, and they were given a number of constraints. What we've done is, well, the number of constraints are actually quite lengthy, but more or less what I'm going to tell you right now is that they just had to stay on the site, and they had to own the studio, and they would rent out the office space. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Team 45, and we'll go ahead and get underway. Thank you. Oh, the format. We're going to do, sorry guys. We're going to do a 15-minute presentation, and then we're going to do a 15-minute Q&A. The Q&A is going to come from both the finalist judges and the audience, so feel free to go ahead and ask questions. Ready, guys?
Good morning. We are Team 45. My name is Dylan Lazovic. These are my partners, Carly Zapernick, Andrea Reynal, and Jason McAleese. And we're very excited to present to you today our proposal for the brand new ITV house and the standard hotel and residences on the South Bank of London. We approached this project with 3 main objectives. Firstly, we wanted to optimize ITV's tenancy needs and user experience on the site. Secondly, we wanted to enhance the urban condition of Upper Ground and the surrounding district. And thirdly, we wanted to maximize returns for our investor partners. A few key takeaways from this executive summary. You'll notice the mixed-use programming. We're proposing approximately 860,000 square feet. The tower to the right is ITV's brand new studio space and improved, efficient office space above. The larger tower to the left is the hotel and condominium flats. We've allocated 3 years for permitting and construction. Jason will go into more detail about the capital structure, but you'll see that we are delivering attractive pre-tax returns for our investor partners. So the site is located in a designated urban regeneration zone in which new jobs, homes, and visitor activity are all actively promoted. By constructing a hotel and consolidating ITV headquarters on site, we're bringing a number of new jobs to the neighborhood. We believe this site is prime for residential development, so we're proposing 131 new flats. We've also provided for the construction of affordable housing off-site. Through the placement of specific programming, we plan on activating multiple fronts of our property, and through the mix of programs, we plan to activate the site both day and night. We take the view corridor management regulation very seriously. The two towers respect and frame the view from Westminster Pier to St. Paul's Cathedral. We also believe that building tall will require a commitment to high quality design, so we have allocated in our budget design fees that we believe are commensurate with design of international acclaim. Looking at the existing and future context of the site, you'll see our property is located in the middle of a burgeoning cultural access with such prominent institutions such as the National Theater, the Tate Modern, not very far away. You'll also notice significant pipeline activity. A number of luxury residences and upscale hospitality are being injected into the neighborhood over the next 2 to 3 years. We see this as actually a benefit. It's going to create a vibrant mixed-use community with an emphasis on culture and arts that we believe our property will be well positioned to join. A couple other key points on the context. You'll notice above Waterloo Station, the proposed Elizabeth House development will add almost 1 million new square feet of office to the area. Additionally, as you can tell from the size of these projects, our specific area has been designated an appropriate site for tall buildings by the Mayor and Planning Authority, which we are excited to pursue. I'm now going to turn this over to Carly, who will discuss how this all relates to our market analysis and strategy.
All right, thank you, Dylan. All right, so the first thing we did was performed a highest and best use analysis to sort of inform what's feasible, what can actually happen on this site. So as you can see from these values, office provides the highest value, followed by hotel, condo, retail, and then finally apartment. A few key takeaways from this, starting with office, despite being the largest value, we have a few concerns with taking this number sort of as a standalone. Dylan just mentioned there's a lot of new office stock coming online, most of which is located nearer to Waterloo Station than our property, so we have a little bit of concern about going sort of all in on office and how that stock would actually be absorbed. Second, one of ITV's main goals is to enhance their brand, and we see a bit of a challenge bringing a ton of new tenants to the site, that it perhaps could go from being ITV's headquarters to a place where ITV is just located. Second, looking at the next line of total CIL, this has to do with infrastructure and levy requirements. It's something that's required for all new development, but it's especially high for residential. And what this analysis showed us is that condo can in fact absorb this while apartments cannot. So that was very integral to informing our programming. Looking ahead to our acquisition and development strategy, we'll be acquiring the land for £30 million. Total development cost for the project comes in at just under £440 million. Be financed through debt and equity, and we are hoping to partner with AACRE, the Alberta Investment Management Corporation. It's Canada's 5th largest pension. They've just opened an office in London and are actively seeking development investments opportunities of this deal size and risk profile, so we think they'd be a great partner. Our development strategy, Dylan touched on some of the policy and planning objectives. Obviously, we want to meet those. We want to meet the needs of ITV, but we also want to address some of the opportunities we see in the market and earn a substantial return for our investors. Broadly speaking, we want to take this site and turn it into something that is truly mixed use and enhances the character and culture that already exists in the neighborhood. Some of our key strategies. First of all, ITV will get brand new studio and office space. We're going to replace their existing stock, which we find to be extremely inefficient, and provide new, more efficient and more sustainable office space. Secondarily, we see hotel as a no-brainer here. obviously the cultural axis that we're on, it's a great fit, but we've put residents above it because we see great synergies there between the amenities that hotel and residents can use. As well, given that ITV is an entertainment-based company, we see some good synergies between what the hotel could do with ITV. Third, as was mentioned already, the timeline, we can do this in 3 years. We don't see permitting being a huge issue given that some of our peer developments are taller and we do maintain the view corridors, so we don't foresee a huge issue there. And design and sustainability were something that we're very integral to our overall concept. We want this to be something that is synonymous with South Bank, something that adds to the skyline of London. It's something that Londoners are proud of. So looking at our market analysis, fundamentally, London is very strong. We love London as a place to develop. GDP is strong and growing, employment is strong, and foreign investment appetite is really there. As excited we are about London, we're more excited about South Bank. We think there's a ton of opportunity here. Some of the demand drivers, obviously the location, the access to transit, the population growth there is expected to outpace the rest of London, and obviously the tourist attractions which aren't going anywhere anytime soon. There's around 22 million tourists that come through this area every year, so surely there's a way to capitalize on all of that. Looking at residential, demand has outstripped supply in London, so we are seeing a price inflation. We see actually that as a competitive advantage for our site. We believe we can compete on price, being on the south side of the river, while also offering substantial quality. The pipeline is active, as you saw in the site context. Peaking in 2017, 1,200 units online. We're only offering 131 condos, so we think absorption is very reasonable to occur at our site. Looking to the hotel market, we are seeing an increase in the in tourists from emerging markets, UAE, Asia. These people spend money, so obviously we want to try and capture that spending. The pipeline in South Bank isn't overly active given how proximate it is to all of these cultural institutions. The Mondrian would be our biggest competitor nearby, but we actually kind of like the cluster effect, and we see this as something that could work very well. Finally, into retail. The retail market in London is strong. However, we do not see the sort of traditional consumer-based shopping corridors moving from where they currently are on the north side of the river. And instead, given the influx in residential to South Bank, our retailing strategy goes towards more necessity-based community. More people in the area, you're going to need more grocers, drugstores, etc. So that's sort of what we believe, sort of where the market is and sort of how our program addresses that. So I will pass it on to Andrea, who will walk you through our site plan and our programming and pricing.
All right, so when we started looking at the site plan, we took a step back and kind of analyzed the urban context and the neighborhood. We wanted to better generate a greater synergy between the open space to the east and kind of continue that connection between Upper Ground and the Riverwalk, and also draw from the neighbor Gabriel's Wharf shops and market. And so we lined up both streets with retail spaces such as coffee shops and restaurants that can then spill onto the street. But then also we anchored the southwest corner of the building with an ITV studio that would have big windows so that they can have a live talk show and better connect to the neighborhood around it, so that the pedestrian experience also becomes a part of the studios. The hotel draws people to the Riverwalk, and then the hierarchy of the public and private spaces was really informative in our design. And so the condos, which is the yellow color there, is accessed through a semi-public court. And all of the serviced areas for the building are accessed through the east side of the building, which is kind of the back side of the market. So all of the service kind of is separate from the public areas. In terms of the hotel, we kept all of the amenity spaces on the lower levels, so conference meetings, fitness, spa, and this allowed us to move our hotel rooms above the ITV podium behind it, so all of the hotel rooms have views. The condo on top, the condo tower on top, the sizes and prices of the condos vary, so as you go up in the tower, they become larger and more expensive. The ITV office space, we enlarged the existing plate, so we made it more efficient by almost, or more than tripling the net square feet available for office space. And that also allowed ITV to consolidate all of their offices into one building. The condos target foreign investment and wealthy domestic individuals that are looking for a more trendy, upscale living style. The office is looking to attract a hotel like the Standard by Andre Velaz, who's known for placemaking, and he has a big interest in the entertainment component of the hotel as well. And in terms of the design philosophy, we really think that we want to connect the building to the neighborhood, and we are willing to pay a little bit more for good quality design that will look at the materials and the layout of the building, how it connects to London and the surrounding. We've also added a 5% premium on construction costs to account for sustainable design. And because we're next to the river and in a flood zone, we've also included resilient design features to limit the water runoff on the site. And now I'm going to pass it off to Jason, who's going to walk you through the financial strategy of the project.
Thanks, Andrea. As mentioned, the proposal has a budget of £439 million, financed equally by debt and equity. There's two elements of the budget we'd like to call out in particular. One is the £32 million we budgeted for design, which is consistent with our strategy of producing a world-class building. The second is the £28 million we're contributing to the community improvement levy, as well as for the provision of off-site affordable housing versus on-site affordable housing provision, which we feel would result in less units. In terms of the return measures, we targeted a 20% before-tax IRR to the investor, which we think is consistent with a project that carries development risk and condominium development risk in particular, balanced against the strength of London and this submarket in particular. We sensitize these risks in a number of ways. First, we created both pessimistic and optimistic scenarios by varying some of our key assumptions, and discovered that even in the pessimistic scenario, our leveraged IRR before tax exceeded the preferred return hurdle we had assumed of 10%. We also looked at providing affordable housing on-site versus off-site. We realized that might have been a controversial proposal, and discovered our IRR to the investor on a leverage basis fell to 16%, so still a viable investment. And last, we actually sensitized a scenario where we're not approved to build anything at all besides a new studio for ITV and new office space for ITV, and still achieved an unleveraged IRR at the project level of 7%. So we think this provides both our investors and ourselves good downside protection. On the subject of risk, we want to highlight three of the key risks of this project and ways we feel we've mitigated them. One is permitting risk, and we see that stemming from two sources. One, the height of our building, as well as the choice to provide affordable housing off-site versus on-site. In terms of height, it's risky to propose a 39-story, 464-foot tower directly on the Thames, but there are a number of projects either planned or existing that are in some cases twice as high that have been approved and built. We also think our world-class design aspirations will help us here. And in terms of the off-site affordable housing provision, as mentioned, we sensitize providing that on-site if necessary. In terms of interest rates, we tried to keep our loan-to-cost ratio to what we feel is a conservative 50%. And the last risk we saw as crucial is the risk of condominium supply in the submarket. As mentioned, there are a number of projects coming online in the next few years. We, as a result, reduced the number of units that we had in our project to 131. Most, if not all, of the competitors have 200 to 300. We also adopted a pricing strategy that doesn't aim to set any kind of new market standard here. It's really pegged to what we feel is a market average in this submarket. So to conclude, we feel that we're addressing the three key objectives that we outlined at the beginning. We feel we're meeting ITV's needs by providing them new, efficient space that'll enhance their visibility and their brand. We feel we're enhancing the urban context and condition by activating the waterfront and upper ground, by introducing a diverse mixture of uses and 24-hour activity, and we're developing a world-class building and offering our investor great returns. So we hope you enjoyed our proposal. We'd welcome any questions that you have.
Just a couple quick questions. How much have you budgeted for ITV to relocate off-site while you build their new building before they come back?
The answer was zero. We took it as an assumption that it was given that ITV had arranged for themselves to go off-site for 3 years, up to 3 years.
And how much have you budgeted for when ITV comes back into their office space beyond the base core and shell build for their office space to be fitted out to a Class A occupational standard?
We had 20 pounds a square foot in tenant improvements on top of our original budget for the shell, which was 247 pounds per square foot.
And then for the hotel, what kind of fittings, furniture, and budget did you have?
We just used an all-in number for that, and it was about 350 pounds. We didn't break them out separately.
Thanks.
Just following up on that, so what was the total aggregate cost of the studio, which I'm assuming you're handing the keys over, right? They get a condominium ownership of their studio office space. So what was the cost of that, the construction of that space?
It was 200 pounds a square foot times, I think we delivered 167,000 square feet, so call it 30 million pounds, plus they wanted 100 parking spaces with that, which we built at 30,000 pounds per stall.
And where I'm going with that is, so you thought that was a good offering for ITV. You pay them $30 million for a building that they just paid 60, oh, I'm in the wrong currency, right?
56 million pounds, yeah.
60 million pounds, and they don't have a budget for office space for 3 years, and then they come back and they essentially get their return back. Did you kind of look at how ITV would look at that?
We did look at it from ITV's perspective. We felt like we're delivering a lot to them that's intangible, right? We feel that we're giving them brand new space and highly enhanced presence in this submarket. And so we thought if they're going to look at this strictly on an economic basis, we're unlikely to win this bid. But if they're looking at kind of the whole package that we feel we're offering in terms of the design, the presence on the streetscape, the quality of their space, we feel their existing space, the floor plate's way too small. So we thought that our bid, that yes, they're not immediately going to make back their entire investment with our purchase price, but we felt that our whole package would be attractive to them in terms of their brand and their visibility in London.
I think that's a big ask, and I just add one more thing. You know, with regard to the construction timing, you've got 18 months up there, 12 months for permitting, but you've got a tight window, right? I mean, you can't build that building in 18 months. It's probably 30 months minimum to get the whole project together, which I'm assuming you're trying to do in one phase. Maybe you can get their building done a little bit on the earlier side, but then you've got that guaranteed risk because they're out in temporary office space, and they're going to be looking to you to backstop that.
And we would clarify, the 18 months, there is a 6-month period in between the 12 and the 18 months for things like demolition, site work, building the parking structure. The 18 months is really from ground up, which we understand might be on the aggressive side, but there is an additional 6 months in there.
And we were concerned about that 3 year that they're locked in, so we figured that if planning was taking longer, we could split into a 2-phase and just go with the office and studio space, and then the residents and hotel can kind of come in at a later phase. But we thought that we were given enough time frame to maybe get it all done in 3 years.
Sorry, just one more follow-up point. We do feel that, as Jason said, if they're purely motivated by economic reasons, that they may not be attracted to our bid as much as other ones. However, the intangible things that we are offering them, we feel might at least warrant a second offer on our part, in which case we would be prepared to offer a little more. We did sensitize our returns, and we gave them a full return of capital, and we were still hitting a mid-teen pre-tax levered return to our investor partner. So it doesn't kill the deal. It still is a fine deal. We were just sort of trying to maximize the returns to our limited partners.
Charles, Simon, do you guys have questions?
Did you put any consideration to what the use could be put for the studios in the event that in the medium term ITV no longer needed to use them as studios? In terms of, you've taken the parameters, but in due course things change, and maybe ITV will not be there in 5 or 10 years. So has any thought been given to what uses would be best for that particular space and how easy it would be to adapt to it?
was our understanding that ITV owns that studio space outright. So, I mean, to the extent that they're not there, if they want to sell it back. I mean, studio is not a typology we're all very familiar with. It's our understanding sort of that it's mostly a shell, and then a lot of stuff happens inside of it that's a lot more sort of technical, but the actual shell is really, that's all it is. In that sense, it might be easily adaptable to other things. This area is growing with a shell that is convertible as the market grows. Perhaps retail of a higher, above the necessity that we talk to becomes more viable. It is right on the street front, so that gives you a tremendous opportunity. But I guess, yeah, if ITV goes somewhere, then that would be an opportunity there.
I have a second question to do with affordable housing.
Sure.
Are you assuming that you will be allowed to produce the affordable housing off-site at the same contribution? Do you believe that, that the planners would be looking to obtain a certain amount greater contribution from you for doing it off-site rather than on-site?
Yeah, we did assume that they would seek a greater contribution. We had budgeted £13 million, which we calculated based on the revenue differential between a 100% market rate building and one that had an affordable component, and then kind of looked at how many affordable units we thought we could provide in our building versus how much that £13 million could produce off-site, either on its own or coupled with other contributions from other projects.
Okay.
Well, there's a lot of work in 5 days. I have to say I'm very impressed. But you can probably tell that the big question is the economic one, which is a company that spends £56 million and then makes proposals. And that is the real dynamic here, I think. So I think you got quizzed on that quite a lot. But what I was quite interested in is your 20% return and how you alighted on that as the right number. I know that you're trying to keep your investors happy, and I think we'd all be happy with a 20% return. But that's not the way the world is at the moment. Interest rates are at historic lows and continue to be so for some considerable time. And so I was interested in your sort of mathematical thinking about the risk premiums involved in real estate development and in this type of project, which you agree is probably a core location. And you've got very, very different components to the offering: hotel, residential, and offices. And given that you're probably going to be in the room with ITV and they're asking you what your returns are and what you thought you were going to make out of this, I'd be interested to see how you justify the 20% or whether you wanted to rethink it.
I think you already hit on a couple of the risk premia that we added. We kind of thought about if this were an existing core asset, what would the cap rate be? And then what would you start adding to it? So you mentioned the mixture of uses we think adds to it. We think the fact that ITV is staying as an owner, that they're going to own a piece of this site that isn't going to go to the investor, adds complication. We think the construction, the timeline adds a lot of risk to it. The fact that this is a development project, the fact that there's for sale elements in it. Also, we love the submarket, but in many ways what we're introducing is somewhat untested. Particularly the hotel. When we looked at the existing product, there's really a wide band where there is no hotel in this area yet. And the hotel that is kind of outside that band is things like Holiday Inn and hotels that come in at a much lower price point. So we're introducing that, plus these condominiums, which are going up all over the submarket, but really there's no building you can point to now and say that's market and we can peg that. So we started adding all of those things on top of that return, and that's kind of how we got to 20, which is what we thought would be reasonable.
And the maths behind it?
The actual numbers?
Well, you got interest rates at 3%.
We assumed 5, and then we felt there'd be, we didn't maybe do it as quantitatively as you're assuming we did, but we just sort of added all of those on top of it and came up with our 20.
Did you think that having a hotel component increased the risk or decreased the risk of the site? And how'd you come up with hotel instead of just all residential?
So if you look at the highest and best use, that sort of drove that a little bit. The lack of hotel in the area right now, we saw as an opportunity. Mondrian is already under construction and is nearly built. So the fact that they were the first mover, you never really want to be first. You sort of want to come in second. So that, and given where we are, I mean, we're in like this cultural corridor with these 22 million people go through this corridor every year. I mean, having a hotel there seems like a no-brainer to us. We were concerned also to your comment about all in on residential. There are a number of projects under construction in plan. So I think overemphasizing the number of units of residential for us, we had a little bit of concern about those units getting absorbed and perhaps the market being overbuilt. So by bringing on hotel, which we think is something that will work very well here, just strategically, and introducing the residents, albeit at a limited number of just 130, sort of just strategically made sense and allowed us to capitalize on both those uses without sort of having to commit all into one. That makes sense.
I just add, I think the hotel, because it's a much more public use than, say, high-end residential, was key to our goal of activating the site. It's going to bring a lot of people to and from the site, which also helps the retail, which helps ITV. So that was another reason that we picked hotel.
What do you guys think an appropriate unlevered return is for this kind of development project?
I think we're at 14, and we were kind of envisioning 12 to 14.
Okay, and then I think you mentioned as you were introducing the project that you found out that maybe your off-site affordability payment was maybe an ambitious assumption, and that if I think you suggested that the levered return was lower if you brought it on-site. Mm-hmm. What did you say, 16?
16 levered
Right.
to the investor.
Right. Okay. So if we delever that, what's that, around an 8%? 9% unlevered?
9, 10, yeah.
So given what you just said about wanting unlevered 12 to 14s, but then realizing that the project's actually maybe an unlevered 8 or 9, would you build it?
I think we would have to reevaluate our program. I think we were trying to mitigate some of our risks in terms of high amount of units, things like that. I think we could certainly be more ambitious with what we were proposing to make up some of those lost returns.
Thanks.
To bridge the gap, I think you can sense we feel there might be from ITV's perspective. Can you think of any other ways they might participate in the project going forward to make that more palatable for them?
In terms of, again, I think everyone's talked about sort of the quality of space. Their current office floor plates are insanely inefficient. I mean, you can make the argument that they're usable. They're really not that great. So I think giving them new space, the studio space is it's much improved. It works with the site. We see a lot of synergies between the hotel, the residents, and ITV. I mean, this is a place that makes TV shows. They want people around. Having a hotel there, there's synergies there. They can have their TV guests stay at the hotel. They can host events within the hotel. I mean, the way this hotel is meant to be positioned is not somewhere where you just sort of like rest your head at night and you leave, in the morning. This is sort of a lifestyle hotel that places a high emphasis on entertainment.